Everyone, and thank you for joining us for this important discussion about grief and depression during COVID-19. My name is Marilyn Wills, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Tyler Smith County. Some of you may not know that issues around mental health have long been a source of League advocacy. So of course, the diagnosis and treatment for grief and depression are not new conversations for any of us. However, this pandemic has clearly disrupted mental health services, and interrupted lives of more of the general population who may not have any chronic mental disorders. Even those who have experienced grief or depression in the past, the picture may look a little bit different now. We hope that this forum will provide educational information and raise awareness of the faces of grief and depression in both adults and children. We want to discuss management strategies, when professional help is needed, connect mental health to current community and individual experiences, and identify, hopefully, resources that are available in the Tyler Smith County area. Ruby Kendrick is the League's Vice President of Program. She will introduce those who will be visiting with us tonight. Thank you, Ruby. And thank your team for bringing this important discussion to us. And I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Marilyn. Again, we're excited about our information forum tonight. Our panelists that we have with us, Mrs. Laura Newsom, who is a licensed professional counselor. She is the Division Director of Crisis Screening and Intake Services at the Andrews Center. We have Ms. Lachey Hibbler, who is a doctoral psychology intern at the University of Texas Health Science Center, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Medicine. We have Mrs. Mildred Whitty, the Executive Director of the Tyler National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. We have Pastor Nicholas McGroop. He is a board certified Christian counselor. We have Ms. Valinda Stanton, entertainer, motivational speaker, and author of the book Sold Out Volume 2, Beating the Odds, Being Kept by Faith. And we also have, assisting me this evening is Ms. Jasmine Cobb, who is also a licensed professional grief counselor and mental health social worker. And she's going to be helping me with the hosting, and she will also be monitoring our questions. Please, audience, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We're saving about 10 minutes at the end to address your questions, and those that we run out of time in addressing, we will get answers and put them on our website. So we're ready to go. And as Marilyn said, the pandemic has certainly rocked our world. And as we've talked about, again, everything that has happened in respect to where we are, and all of this started about 395 days ago. Again, the world changed, right? And literally with the blink of an eye, we were on lockdown, right? Lockdown with instructions not to leave the house except for essentials. We realized that toilet paper and Lysol were just everybody, it was an obsession, okay? And you might be able to find them and you might not be able to find it. But at any rate, again, many people who had really wanted to work from home, they were able to start working from home. But unfortunately, a lot of folks didn't have a job, right? And our kitchen tables became desks for the children, for school. Couldn't go to church anymore, had to get into trying to do the streaming thing at some point, but that didn't happen that quickly. And so again, everything was changed in that respect. So as we thought about the grief depression, we'll kind of start the conversation. What's the definition? Are they similar? Some of the symptoms and signs similar? And so I just asked Jasmine to give us a little synopsis just to kind of start the conversation a little bit about that so the audience can be clear exactly what we're talking about with both of those, and then we'll get feedback about that and move on to the rest of our discussion.
Thank you. All righty, so there is a lot to unpack tonight, and I hope everyone can leave here with something. So here's a few things you need to know about the conversation taking place this evening surrounding grief and depression. Many times when we hear the word grief, we usually associate the word with death and dying. However, there are actually 40 different experiences in life that can lead to grief, including one that's already been mentioned that we're already experiencing together, the COVID-19 pandemic. Some other examples of loss include divorce, the end of relationships, moving, graduating, the death of a pet, and job loss as well. So please note, during the mentions of grief, I'm specifically going to be talking about the observations of normal grief. So grief and depression are very different in how they impact our quality of life and daily functioning. Grief, by definition, is a natural reaction to any loss. Normal grief is not a mental illness as defined by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also known as the DSM-5, or what I like to call the Bible of mental health. That's pretty big. Whereas depression, on the other hand, which is also referred to as clinical depression, is actually a mental disorder as defined by the DSM-5, which is also actually treatable. Now, as I mentioned, grief is very different from depression. However, there is some overlap in symptoms, such as trouble with focus, sleep-related issues, being easily upset, reduced sense of concentration, difficulty completing tasks. That's just to name a few. So please note, it is also common for grievers to self-identify as being depressive. And many times, given the shortage of time when they're in seeing a doctor, we'll present our symptoms as a medical condition, and in that case, it's not uncommon for doctors to prescribe, sometimes, and every case is different, but mood altering medications, which will ultimately treat some of the symptoms. So here is where I want to highlight diagnosis and a few myths associated with grief and depression. And tonight, I'm pretty sure we'll hear many more from the panel. It is not uncommon for people struggling with grief to also be diagnosed with depression. And there are just a few reasons for this that I'm going to specifically mention. Dealing with the intricacies of grief is not necessarily included in a doctor's medical training. Therefore, again, symptoms can be treated, but when it comes to specifically normal grief, the symptoms are treated and then what's left? The underlying issues of what is causing the pain of the emotional loss. So we'll also be talking about the phases of grief tonight and how grief and depression shows up across the lifespan. And as I approach the end, in grief, children are referred to as the forgotten mourners. And that's because they process feelings through behavior, which can also show up in how they play. A last known fact is children as young as during the infancy stage can also actually grieve as well. So again, we have a lot to unpack, and I'll toss it over to the panelists. Thank you all so much for participating tonight and being here.
Lachey, can you shed some insight into some of what Jasmine was just referring to related to the phases of grief and depression in that description?
Yeah, she was spot on, actually. Grief can look like a lot of things. One of the things with the pandemic is termination of social relationships, right? People grieve the loss of being able to sit next to someone and have a conversation face to face. So that's something that was lost during the pandemic, and it affects us deeply, right? Humans are social beings. When a baby is born, the first thing they do is lay the baby on the mother's chest, right? So that's something that we have ingrained in us from not only the womb, but the first moments that we enter life. So for humans, it impacts us negatively in a mental way, because we don't have that same outlet that we had. We don't have that endorphin release from having good laughter and communication with others. So it alters our mood. It makes us, a little bit sad, a little frustrated, sometimes angry, upset, things that we could do easily, right? Go to a friend's house and have a conversation, go out to eat, or go to church with your loved ones. Those are things we can't do now, or, we're prohibited from doing for quite some time, and still should be limited in doing now, even after the vaccine is rolled out. So she was definitely spot on. It's not always death. You can grieve the loss of relationships, loss of positions and jobs that you once had, the loss of mobility, right? Some people used to get up and go all the time, and then medical issues arise, and now you can't do the things that you used to. Some people can't perform the same jobs that they used to have. So you're grieving the loss of that relationship and that connection that you had. So she was spot on. Grief is not always associated with death. It could be the loss of any meaningful relationship or any meaningful connection to something that you once had.
Thank you. Laura, anything you can add to that conversation? Any comments about grief and depression from that
I think
perspective?
Lachey and Jasmine have done a great job of covering that, because I was going to add about the loss of our freedom and ability to move about and ability to touch. I mean, you've seen so many videos of grandmas hugging once they got vaccines, hugging their grandchildren, and just being, and the grandchildren just having that need. I know for me, Zoom increased a lot because that was one way to connect. My grandkids in Houston learned how to FaceTime, and they were calling all the time because they missed that connection. So again, I think Jasmine and Lachey covered it. I know in the mental health field, we start at first, when it first happened, we were not getting a whole lot of calls dealing with the pandemic. It was our usual. Our center, we never closed. And of course, crisis services never shut down. So we were always dealing with that, and we were not getting a whole lot of calls. But as it rolled on, the longer it went, not only did it start to alter those who were already dealing with mental illness, but those who considered themselves healthy, they started to question, their ability to make it through this pandemic and what it held. And the more of actual deaths that happened, that of course increased people's ability to move on. So again, the grief process, the mental health process, it was all intertwined. And like I said, it's not over yet. We're probably going to see, we've been warned that we will probably see more suicides behind this. And right now, we don't have our finger on all the causes and but as they just talked about, deep-seated grief and depression, we may see that. So again, those are things that we need to watch, people that we're close to, that we love, make sure that they're doing okay, make sure that they're starting to come out of the isolation, because that's part of it. The isolation has caused a lot of it. When people isolate, when you have no one to reach out to, that's when the problem increases.
And you led right into
my
next question related to, or at least you alluded to, increase in services in relationship to the pandemic and the isolation and the depression. So it sounds like there definitely has been an increase in those seeking help from what you just said. And Pastor Nicholas, from the faith community, what have you seen as far as, again, in the faith community, your parishioners, what have you seen in that community related to grief, depression, or individuals, again, reaching out for more Christian counseling, or are they?
Sure. Well, sure, because right now the church has begun to recognize mental health problems. In times past, the church has not been so welcoming or to address mental health issues. Or we would often hear the cliche, "Oh, we'll pray about it." But I believe the pandemic kind of forced the hand of leaders to become more observant and to become more noted on what's leading to the disabilities of people that are dealing with grief and depression in just a whole. And so as it relates even to Isaiah 61:1, the prophet Isaiah, he's dealing with the brokenhearted. And so grief and depression stems from the root. And so the root is the brokenheartedness. And so a lot of the languages that many of us communicated through was physical touch. And so during this pandemic, not having the physical touch, being in our churches, in our community, being refrained when we go into places, the social distancing, 6 feet apart. And so we have seen many people reach out. I have seen in my profession, many people reaching out and just needing the conversation. And so I believe that the pandemic has forced a faith-based community to be more noted or recognizing mental health issues and depression and deep-seated grief.
Thank you. Thank you. I wondered what your perspective was going to be on that, because I am aware that that has been, the reaction in the past related to, Christians and that faith base. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Ms. Valinda and give her an opportunity just to share her story briefly about depression now. And I guess my other question that I hadn't talked to you about was, with the pandemic, has anything changed for you? So we'll go ahead and take a few minutes and let you just share your story and what worked as far as getting you back to where you needed to be. And if you've seen any impact with COVID.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I am Verlinda Stanton, originally from Tyler, and a newly found author, motivational speaker, and now newly author this year of 2021. My book is titled Sold Out, Volume 2, where there's different testimonials in here in regards to how we beat the odds and overcame all of our tragedies that we have gone through. My title chapter is titled Being Kept by Faith While Beating the Odds. And I speak on molestation, domestic violence, being raped, and then diagnosed with HIV. So one person going through all of that, depression played a great part, in my journey. In my journey, the anxiety, the not knowing the whys, and all of what I've gone through really had gotten me down. But what made me thrive and what made me fight and press my way through was my will to live, all the different storms that were thrown my way along my journey. And with a pandemic, I went through anxiety, I went through depression, and I went through kind of mood swings, disorders, with people, with family. And when I found myself being different with people or reacting differently to people, I had to put my blinders on and just stop and say, hey, wait a minute, you need to take control and not let your emotions control you. So I had to take a hold of the wheel and continue to guide myself on my journey. And throughout this whole pandemic, right before the pandemic was announced, I was diagnosed with flu a month prior to them announcing about the COVID. So then this was the worst I had. So they said I didn't have it because I got tested afterwards, but I don't know if I went through it or not. But what it done, it like you said, kept us from our families. I have a child, I have grandchildren, and they live 50 miles from me, you know, just the me being by myself and not able to really just reach out physically when we had that everyday thing, you know, going on. So that played a big part in, I started getting depressed again because I'm home alone and all we had was the telephone conversation. So then I had to go out and buy me a Apple product so I could do the FaceTime thing, you know, and then, you know, learn how to work this Zoom and what have you. But my story, in order for me to move forward with what I was going through, I had to remember that my great grandmother taught me about faith and having faith and walking in faith. And so ever since I was 9 years old, I remember all she talked about was faith, baby. You just got to have faith. Whatever you do, you step out on faith. So when these storms came my way, being molested, being raped, diagnosed with HIV, going through all this anxiety and depression, I was like, Lord, how much more can one person take? But you know what? God said to me, baby, you have the faith. It's in you. And I would hear the voice of my great grandmother, you know, say, baby, just go for it. God has you. He will never leave you. And he never left me. And it was the will to live and the seeds that she had imparted in my life that kept me going. And with counseling, I got counseling through all of the different storms that came my way. And we hear mental health, we think, oh, she crazy, he crazy. And a lot of us don't want to seek out help. But see, I had the will to live because I didn't want to die. I didn't want to go crazy. I didn't want to kill myself. So whatever I needed to do to survive, that's what I did. And that's what I wanted to encourage everyone, to not be embarrassed about the things you've gone through, because what you're going through is just a test. And you learn from that test, and God will keep elevating you, because if you pass that test, then you'll pass the next test. And I ask all of you to join me on this journey of healing, because our world needs healing. We individually need healing. Amen. And one thing I want to touch on where Pastor McGrew was talking about counseling. I went to the church, don't want to touch on a lot of things. See, I was raised in the church, and a lot of stuff they don't talk about, don't want to talk about. When I was diagnosed with HIV, I went to the church, tried to get counseling and talk, had that one meeting. Did they reach back out to me? No. So you know what I did? I went to my Heavenly Father and I talked to him daily. And I said, Lord, what do I do? Where do I need to go? What steps do I need to take? So if you find yourself at a loss and you can't find someone, God will lead you in a direction of where you need to be, or bring people in your path that can connect with you and give you the things that you need to help you through whatever it is that you're going through. You may not be going through anything that I've gone through, but in my book, when I talk about the different obstacles that came my way, and I overcame undetectable with this HIV for over 2 years. Praise God. But throughout this journey, honey, it's been a long journey, but you know what? I never stopped working. I never stopped singing and dancing. I never stopped living. I kept living because I said, I'm not going to let, I did not accept the diagnosis. And I don't ever say that I have that. I said I was diagnosed with that. Because life and death is in the power of the tongue. What you speak, you shall have. So I don't speak that I have that. This is what I was diagnosed with, okay? So you have to watch how you speak things over your life, your heart. And he will continue to carry you through your storms. And while you're going through your storms, know that the storms are only temporary. They're only temporary. Let your light shine while you're going through that storm. Yes, you may hurt. You're going to cry. You're going to be like spazzed out. What's going on here? But just know that God has you. Keep the faith. Walk in the faith. Believe in the faith. Don't just say, I got faith. A lot of people say, I have faith. Well, then are you walking in your faith? You have to walk in it. You can't just say, I have faith or I believe in it. You have to walk in it. And when you walk in it, then everything else will fall into place. And I thank you all that you thought enough of me to bring me on to this panel tonight, because I was talking with someone and told them I was on this, you know what they said to me? Well, why are you speaking on a mental health panel? Okay, well, you need to go and do some research, because each and every one of us here tonight have gone through some type of depression, some type of anxiety, some type of mental disorder that we do not want to claim, okay? But when you notice that there is something different about yourself, reach out to someone. Don't be embarrassed. Reach out to someone so that you can seek the right and necessary help that you need to seek. And I am just grateful for the journey that God has placed me on. I'm grateful for the elevation. I'm grateful just for the different areas and different platforms that he's placing me on, because people need to hear my story. And I'm only giving a brief synopsis of it tonight. But I ask that you evaluate yourself, look at yourself. Self-care is number one. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your kids, your husband, whoever you're taking care of. We try to do a lot of things. I was guilty of that. I'm trying to take care of this and that and all of this and that, but not taking care of me. So I have to maintain my health so that I can do the things that God has designed and purposed me to do. So I just thank you all for that. And if you are interested in getting my book, I do have my book sold out volume 2. I will be typing in the comments my website and different ways that you can obtain this book here. And I co-authored with several other authors. So there are a numerous of I'm not going to call them stories, of true testimonials in here of how people overcame their grief, how they overcame the loss of their loved one, how they overcame PTSD, how they're dealing with that. We all need some type of help. And this book is talking about a lot of things that we, the people, do not want to speak on. So I decided, once God gave me the vision, that I was going to do his will, because he kept saying, Verlinda, I have placed you in many platforms and you're still not talking to the people about what you need to talk about. So I've totally surrendered to him. I said, okay, Lord, use me however you see fit. I will share my stories. I will share everything to help someone else overcome their tragedies that they're going through.
Ms. Kendricks, this is Pastor Brew.
Yes.
Could I please address something that I think is very important, what Ms. Stanton pointed out about how the church can approach, because I know now the church in its past, in its history, has been a refuge for so many things. And so when we talk about the civil rights movement, it was birthed out of the church. And we talk about different things of that nature. And so I think that the church has to talk about the issues using a language that is appropriate. I think that's why I would even encourage, if you are a part of a church or a local church or a community, figure out how to encourage the congregation to offer particular help and hospitality. These are things that you can do if you don't have the budget or the staff of Christian counselors, or you don't have a budget to have mental health needs, or you can help connect those with trustworthy community resources. So I think, and refer out and reach out and extend Christ's love through friendship and through fellowship. And I think that's the biggest problem in the church as a culture, is that we've never been told how to. And so we frown on when people have, or even leaders, and we are moving into a generation of pastors that you're going to have more than just a call to be able to help the people. You're going to have some type of education, some type of just higher learning for yourself, to be able to help your parishioners and to help the community that you serve and hold. And so on behalf of that church, I want to repent to you, Ms. Stanton, that the church was not in a position. Thank you, Jesus. That the church was not in a position to give you what you needed as a daughter, as a follower of Christ. And so I hope that you would take my repentance as a part of that church's era, and that you are doing well. God bless you. Thank you. Ms.
Thank you.
Kendrick.
Thank you for that comment.
Ruby, this is Laura.
Yes.
And I would like to expound a little bit on what Berlinda was talking about, taking care of yourself. One thing that I want to add, it's a holistic approach. And Pastor McGrew, we look at mind, body, and spirit. And so, of course, you cannot do it without the spiritual realm of it. You've got to reach for God. A lot of people in our business like to say higher power. I say turn to God, okay? But then she talked about taking care of yourself. And, there are many things we can do just on a small basis. One is eating healthier. Most of us took to snacks and anything that made us feel good. That's one thing that we do. We look for that comfort food. And we sat around and got heavier and bigger. And, and now it's time to start moving. And as that sunlight hits you out there, it starts those chemicals in the body to move and act the way they should. And, so it's physical, eat healthier, exercise, get out in the sunlight, stop isolating. This is a plug, and this is not Andrew Center. This is a plug from Laura. Go get that vaccine if you hadn't gotten it. I do know a lot of us are still hesitant and have reservations. And I was listening to the news today, and it was people saying, no, I'm still waiting. To truly know the full effect of a vaccine is going to take years. And so right now, to get this pandemic under control so that we don't have pandemonium, we need to go and vaccinate so that we can get out and start moving around and start getting back together as people. So Berlinda, you said, take care of yourself. That is very, very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a good segue, Laura, into everything, the management pieces, and to begin some dialogue about just the services that are available. It was certainly good to hear Pastor McGrew's comment, and the self-help kinds of things that we need to do in order to take care of ourselves are so important. And if anyone, Lachey, do you have anything else to add about, or Miss Mildred has?
Hello.
has made it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I got, you know what? I just want to say, you know how I got on? This is my advice. Unplug it all, turn it off, and turn it back on.
Okay, that works. That works. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
I actually had a question for Miss Mildred.
I feel connected when I got my face in with you.
We're good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank
you.
I did appreciate what Pastor McGrew was saying, and that's, I might add something later to that. I mean, not add to it, but say something about that.
Okay.
Well, Miss Mildred, I have a question for you. If you don't mind jumping right in. Okay, so like we've talked about grief and depression, and as we know, we like to think just as a society that grief or depression looks like linear, but we really know that it's like a big glob of twists and turns and ups and downs. Yeah. Could you speak to some to that from the point of view of NAMI, as well as some grief and, as well as some misconceptions and myths about grief and depression, and then maybe segue into like, some anecdotes to those.
Okay. Oh, aren't you? I love Jasmine. Okay. Well, for grief and depression, I was going to say that as far as dealing with grief, if anybody were doing that, I would send them to their pastor. I mean, that is usually the very best way, because I don't know all the things that pastors know to say to children or to families. And so generally what I found is it's better just to say nothing and listen and just nod, you know, because everything that comes out of your mouth, if somebody's grieving, no, I don't mean your mouth. My mouth is usually the wrong thing to say. And so then you wanted me to say something, but as far as depression goes, depression is not always related to grief and not always related to something specific. And sometimes stress and anxiety, and suddenly, you know, a child or your family member, or you just suddenly start crying. You don't even put your finger on it exactly. It's like this unrelenting stress. I noticed, and some of you were talking about how we had more calls, the Andrews Center, Laura, and those others lately that are more serious. NAMI would get a lot of calls before the shutdown and COVID that were dealing with how do I get my loved one out of jail or something like that. You know, dealing with the juvenile justice or the justice area. But that stopped, and there were triple the calls of how can we get into a hospital. Of course, the Andrews Center was overwhelmed there, and having to see people outside. I think it's great UT Health Northeast for an emergency room. I just send them there, and they came through. But there were a lot of calls where people felt like they'd gone different places and couldn't. These are surrounding areas. You know, Longview and some of these others, they couldn't even get a person into a hospital. And we thought the main thing is not to have a person having a mental health episode, which this isolation was causing, just like y'all were talking about. Didn't want to have them panic and call the law enforcement because they don't really have an option. If there's not a hospital, then they do end up in jail. And that's so much worse because guess what they do when somebody is suicidal in jail? They put them in solitary confinement. I mean, it's just what you just want to scream, but they do. And so there's nothing that helps in that, you know, happening with that.
Mildred,
Yeah.
Hi, Mildred, this is Laura. And I just wanted to add what you were saying about the hospitalization during COVID. That really got to be a bottleneck because even the hospitals that were available when someone would test positive on that unit or what have you, they would have to shut it down for so long. And so it did get a little bit hard to get people in the hospital. So COVID complicated a lot of things. And yeah, and so we Texas recognized that, and then locally we recognized that. And so we came up with hotline numbers. Well, we already had the crisis hotline, but we came up with COVID support lines, and we even have a local emotional support line. It's not a crisis line. I want to say that it's more of people that just want to call and vent and talk. I heard someone say earlier they need to talk that through and talk it out. So we do have a line for that now. And on that line, they also can give you a list of resources and things. Like some people are looking for certain resources. You know, they may be looking for food or help with rent or help with something else. It's not that Andrews Center has the funds to do that, but we have a list of resources that we can point you to in addition to 211. I want to make sure everyone knows 211 is a resource line, just has always been there. People can call and get information, but I will type in the chat if that's okay.
Yes.
The emotional support line as well as the COVID-19 mental health support line.
Yes, I think that would be awesome, Laura. And I think what I'd like to move the conversation to now is a little bit about resources and availability of resources. I'm going to switch to Lachey for just a minute. UT and give an opportunity to kind of talk about what services are available there. I know you have both inpatient and outpatient. You see inpatient and outpatients. So can you just spend just a couple of minutes letting people know about UT's services? Because we're going to get to part of what we want to get to is availability of services, those kinds of things. And I want to cover some of that before it gets to, we lose track of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So UT has a lot of services, and what Ms. Laura was speaking to, right, is COVID really did shut the inpatient units down. So even though I was on site and at the hospital, there were some weeks at a time, 2 to 3 weeks at a time, where I couldn't provide services to those who were inpatient. So being super resourceful, like rolling carts into their room to be able to do it virtually, right? These people are here for help. So we need to be able to figure out a way to help them, right? Despite COVID, despite the precautions, despite everything, right? You don't come to the hospital to just sit there for 2 weeks and then be discharged, because you could have done that at home. So we just have to be super resourceful and thinking about the ways that we provide services. So being a trained almost psychologist, you provide a breadth of services. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming, the things that we can do. So one of the things people don't associate with is like your physical symptoms and your mental health symptoms are one and the same, right? We don't individually separate people into boxes. We treat the whole person. So things such as, cancer and pain management can affect your mood. So we work with people who have chronic fatigue, pain management, sleep disturbances, right? If you're not getting proper sleep, nothing else matters. You can't think clearly, you can't function, you can't operate at your job, you can't be a good parent or a good spouse or, a good employee at all if you can't think clearly. So high risk behaviors, of course, the traditional, suicidal self-injury, right? Cutting, lots of ways that people harm themselves. So we work with those people. We work with treatment adherence. People come in, I don't think this treatment is good for me. Or I don't think I can work with what this doctor is telling me. Well, a lot of times it's a lack of communication. When you go to your provider and they're saying, here, take this, and then they walk away, you're like, okay, wait, what's happening? What is this medication? What is it for? How will it help me? So that's when behavioral health clinicians will come in and kind of walk through those things and help explain what's going on and help people feel more comfortable with treatment adherence. Work with substance abuse, stress management, obviously depression, anxiety, anger, grief, all types of grief, not just loss of a loved one. And those inpatient patients most of them have severe mental illness, psychotic, bipolar, major depressive, that's like non-treatment. Like you can't really treat certain types of depression until you get them. Treatment-resistant depression is what it's called. So you get them on an inpatient unit. Personality disorders, interpersonal difficulties. People don't think that interpersonal difficulties fall within mental health, but when you have a mental health disorder that is impacting your ability to effectively communicate with someone, so now you got an interpersonal difficulty, which is tied to your mental health disorder or diagnosis. So we treat a breadth of things there, variety of services. So we have patients that don't have insurance that we treat. We have patients that do have insurance that we treat. We get referrals from the inpatient unit, outpatient clinics, family medicine. So a lot of times your first entry point into seeing a behavioral health clinician or a mental health clinician is your PCP, right? Being able to go to your PCP and articulate the issues that you're having. Not, I just feel off or I don't feel right? Those are not symptoms. Saying things like, I'm, so tearful and sad that I can't function. I can't sleep. I'm not eating well. When these things start to impact your ability to function, that's when it's clinically significant. So that's the difference between, I'm just having a bad day or I'm having clinically significant depression. Being able to articulate that to your provider, because that's the first step, right? You'll never see a mental health clinician, through the healthcare system that we have set up if you don't communicate to your provider effectively, like I need some help right now. So that's the hardest step, really, is that initial step of being able to have that conversation with your provider. And then again, I think Verlinda touched on it earlier, is the stigma, right? So people have that stigma. Well, I don't want to seem crazy, or I don't want people to think I have a mental health issue. right? And a mental health issue is common, it's normal. It happens to a number of people. The most successful people in the world have been diagnosed with mental health issues. So it's not something to be ashamed about, but it is something to say, if I can't function, maybe I need to seek professional help. And I think that's the differentiating piece between, you know, just having a bad time right now to where it's impacting me and I can't function, I can't parent, I can't work, I can't sleep, it's difficult for me to eat, I can't concentrate, I'm making errors on my job, I'm driving around getting lost and don't know where I am because my mind is just running so much, right? Those anxious thoughts that just don't stop. So being able to differentiate those symptoms and communicate those effectively to your PCP would definitely be the first step.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was just what needed to be said right now, I do believe. So I need to make an appointment with somebody. That's all I can say.
Everybody here.
The sleep issue, yes, okay, so that explains it all. Ms. Mildred, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your program a little bit at NAMI related to the groups that you have with parents, I believe.
Well, the NAMI is yes, and I'll be brief, but NAMI is a nonprofit that offers free classes, educational classes to people who discover that there's a person in the family who has probably a mental health condition, and nobody's ever prepared for that. It's not something you study. You don't study that when you think, I'm going to have a baby, I better learn all about mental illness. Or my child is heading for high school, I better learn all about teen drug abuse. You don't even want to think about it until you need it. And then you're all professionals. Like Tony, are you the child psychologist or the child? You work with children or, oh, well, can y'all hear me? Anyway, don't you get frustrated when you send them back home and it seems like they undo everything you're working on, or they don't understand what you're going for, and so like the parents will let them miss a bunch of appointments or not even get it that they're supposed to make sure the person, say you've prescribed medication or a course of treatment, and the parents aren't on board with you at all. It's generally ignorance of the whole thing, because people so often think they can send a person who's got an illness to you, one of you, or to the hospital, or to Andrew's sitter, or to, a psychologist, a pastor, and you're going to take care of it just like handing out antibiotics for a cold, and then they should just get well. And they don't understand this has got to be a joint thing, and I'm going to have to actually put effort into this. This is my parenting moment. It's time to learn it and get with, one of you, because they can undo everything at home that you work on, not meaning to, but just not following through. That's what NAMI does. People realize they've got an issue with a child or a loved one, a spouse, and they need to learn more about it. If they're going to be willing to work with you, they need the classes. So we have things for families called Family to Family. It's a 9-week course, 3 hours a week, totally free, all the information. And it starts with the biology of the mental illness, and then the psychology and the various types and so forth, and then the social aspects and how to deal with other family members who don't get it. How do you explain it to your family? These things are not things you think of when you suddenly have somebody in the family who has a mental illness, but it starts occurring. And all the NAMI teachers who are trained through the National Alliance on Mental Illness, we're people who learned through them and want to pass that on and are certified through them. And it's a very important. All of us have lived experience with a person who has a mental illness. My son has schizoaffective disorder. I have love the Andrews Center. Oh Lord, Newsom, hello. And UT Health, they never, let me down when we call. Y'all are wonderful. I think Tyler Services, hello, Jeff. Okay, and Verlinda, I have to buy your book, and Dale and Tony. But I'm so grateful to you because I deal every day with a child who, or now he's grown, who did that. And at first, I didn't get it either. And I had people in the classes I taught later who did the same thing I did. I mean, they don't understand why they can't get an immediate appointment, or we do a lot of talking about how the Texas legislature will make rules and never give you money for it, etc. But lately, communicating for COVID, what we need is more basics classes, which are aimed at parents of very young children who are very anxious. And now I'm not making this fast, am I, Laura, Ruby? Am I going too fast? I'll be real fast on this. The basics is for adolescents and or for parents of adolescents. And we're really needing this because their whole routines have been screwed up. And these are people that they weren't even alerted by the schools. It's just that it's making them worried. The children are anxious, not sleeping, the routine. And one of the main things that NAMI tells us to stress is how important it is that they feel secure at home. And that you tell them, even though we don't know when this is going to be over, because that's uncertainty for the future, we're all together and we love you. And to stress, we're a family, we love you, we're here for you. And let's do something together as a family and reestablish, if you're a real slobby mother like I was with 6 children, establish a really good routine where you go to bed at, well, what is it? Whenever you go to bed at 8 o'clock, or you go to bed at 9 o'clock, or just don't be slobby anymore. You've got to get a routine going and hold on to it because children need this, and you've got to get a place for them to work and do all of those things that give them security and stability that they've lost during this time. I guess that's what I wanted to say. And there are a number of other classes for veterans and so forth. And send them to us and we'll tell them how to do what's right that you need them to do to help you take care of the people you're taking care of. Okay, and it's free. We have some things for the people who have the illnesses too, but I won't prolong this. Go to NAMI
Ms. Mildred,
Tyler.
will you put the information in the chat, NAMI's number in the chat, information line in the chat?
Well, now you're telling me to do something hard.
Oh,
Okay, do I just go over here and type it?
Yes.
Okay, to everyone, type message here. Okay, okay.
Okay, Laura.
Wow, y'all. I'm working on this now. Y'all go on and talk.
Okay. Laura, we got to kind of begin to wind things down with you in respect to a little bit in respect to Andrew's services. And we talked about, so funding, I think and the statistic may have changed now. I think I read something where Texas is like 49th in the nation for adequate funding.
You are correct.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
are
40
correct. And
correct.
we've been there for a mighty long time. And although they continue to try to give us resources, it's just not enough to cover the territory and everything that we're dealing with. I know here locally, we lost hospitalization for adolescents and children when ETMC Behavioral Health Center shut down, the one that was over on University. They moved their operations out to UT Northeast out on 271. However, they were not able to accommodate the children. So we are still working, trying, when we hospitalize kids right now, it's a little distance. And of course, parents really don't like doing that. And so we're working, trying to see how we're going to close that gap. That is one thing that we're working on. But Andrews Center provides an array of services. Mildred hit on it. Our main focus, we're contracted with the state. The state is our biggest contractor. We're not a state agency, as a lot of folk think we are, but the state is our biggest resource. And so for the dollars that they send are usually for the most intensive services. Lachey mentioned earlier, the schizophrenia, the bipolar, the major depression. That is the concentration. However, we do still have counseling services for anyone, especially if you have insurance and can pay for that. However, we do have a program for those that aren't able to pay if major depression is one of the main diagnoses. We serve veterans, we serve IDD services, we have a full array. Anyone who wants to be evaluated, we have a number that you can call, because people thought we closed during the pandemic. We never closed, guys. We had a number that you could call for intake and be screened and to see if you needed services. And I can type that number in the chat, because I think even though we're slowly moving back toward moving back into everybody being in the building, there was always someone there. We all worked from home. We did intakes from home. We did crisis via telephone, because the ERs were real scaled down. They didn't want a lot of people entering the ER, the same with the jails. And so we figured out ways to do those screenings and assessments anyway. And so again, anyone that needs an evaluation, I typed in the emotional support number, I typed in the COVID-19 mental health support line. We're here and we're open. We cover 5 counties. I heard Mildred mention Longview. Longview is not one of the areas. There is a like agency across the state of Texas, like Andrews Center. So when you cross boundaries, when you cross lines like Longview, you got Community Health Corps. If you go to the south of us toward Jacksonville, you got Access. So no matter where you move around, we cover 5 counties. And once you get out of those counties, we try to get someone else to pick that up. Something that's coming, we're trying to make ourselves more accessible. We're now considered a certified community behavioral health clinic. And that's going to open more doors. But unfortunately, we got the certification, but no dollars have followed it as of yet. So that is something to keep in mind that is coming. But I do see we definitely have a need for children. We do offer children's services. We got children case managers. We have a program called Yes that deals with the more intensive kids. But right now, hospitalization is a problem.
Okay. So it sounds like it is awareness that there is a gap in services. And you had kind of alluded when we talked earlier that there is some effort being done across the board with a lot of different agencies. Can you explain?
Yes, some of you are familiar with, I know Mildred is, it's called the Behavioral Health Leadership Team. And it pulls together agencies, and right now it's in Smith County. You can go to bhlt.org and take a look, and it'll tell you all the agencies that are involved and some of our goals and what we're working on. And so this group has definitely realized the gaps that are here. We had started working on a crisis stabilization unit, which is going to take a lot more work than people originally thought.
Money.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
And we do
But
have, and Mildred, you can speak to this a little bit if you know more about it, but I know we're getting a clubhouse opened up here in Tyler, and it's basically, it's peer run, it's run by the consumers, and it gives them a place to go and feel needed and wanted, and you know, they set up work and do different things, and so that's coming to Tyler. So that'll be definitely a good asset here. But again, that behavior health leadership team, we're working on several different areas where we know there are gaps in services.
How long has that team been together? When was it formed?
About 3 years ago. Was it 3
Oh.
years
I
ago,
think
Laura?
Mildred, I think
Four?
it's been a little longer than 3,
I
probably.
think maybe it has. About, yeah, you're right. You're right.
And-
About
and-
2016. I
Right.
remember when they brought those psychiatrists from. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, that's when we did the big needs assessment for the area. And
Yes.
so we've been working off of that since that time. And people just, you know, it's amazing that a lot of people just don't realize that it takes time to get anything done. It takes time and money, takes time, effort, and money. And we're working toward that. And we're, you know, we welcome anyone that wants to, because the meetings are open. There is a
Yes.
core group there, but the meetings are generally open.
Great networking. Great
What are the
networking.
meetings?
Find everybody you need to help.
When are the meetings?
Thursdays on not every Thursday, but they're generally on a Thursday. You want us to tell them to
Put it
you
in
on
the
a
chat if you don't mind. That would be
Okay.
great. Put that
Okay.
information in the chat.
Ms. Kendricks,
Yes.
I just wanted to speak on, as Ms. Newsom said and Ms. Mildred, there is a gap that, you know, trying to fill that gap and be able to assess our community. What I have begun to do in offering my service as a Christian counselor, having firsthand lost one of my parishioners to COVID, I was able to reach out to his employer and be able to go out, and they do concrete work. And so there are a lot of contractors and men in that statute that they're not going to come to our services. They're not going to be openly walk in our doors. So we have to extend ourselves. So I've partnered with their company and just go out there and just make myself available to talk to them about grief and talk to them about depression and different things as it pertains to the pandemic. And so I've seen some success there. And I would just say that as to anyone that's listening, if you have a service that you have, I also go to Clarkson Elementary and talk to the kids on every other Wednesday about just anger management,
You're supposed to be great, by the way. That's good. Go on.
To talk to them about how anger dealing with the pandemic, and these are 4th and 5th graders. So I would say that to help the gap along, the gap is there, but in our community, if we would extend ourselves and go to where they are, I think that we would have a better chance. And then what I'm able to do when I see those triggers or see things that are maybe more than what a counselor or Christian counselor can handle, I can refer them out to the Andrews Center and refer them on to a psychologist like Ms. Lachey or something to be able to help them go further. But I think if you're listening in this chat Zoom, I would encourage you, extend yourself during this pandemic. So because we're dealing with not only just the pandemic of COVID, we are dealing with the pandemic of racial injustice. So I always say we're dealing with 2 different types of pandemics. so it becomes a lot. You deal with a lot of grief and a lot of anger and a lot of depression. So I just want to
thank you so much for sharing that. So I think you've already covered one of my questions related to how does grief and or depression show up in children, and are we recognizing that at all? My assumption is it could very well be behavior or outbursts, those kinds of things, maybe not. But again, being able to be able to access services, of course, are crucial. not only for adults, but children too. And
Sure.
certainly, as Mildred said, they've gone through a lot of
Sure.
changes related to, not just being able to go to school. I kind of know how they feel not being able to get out of my house to go to work,
I know.
And
And
I
do we
will say
even want to
too,
go
It's
back?
like,
and I would say too, Miss Kendrick, is just a personal stand on that. I have my daughter and two daughters in high school, and just the social anxiety of not being able to interact, it impacted our household. And I
Yes.
had to, and I was like Miss Mildred, I was like, I didn't understand it, and became very frustrated in my own stuff as a father. And rather than just harp on her about the frustration, I said, let's get her somebody to talk to. Let's get her somebody to release to, and that has worked. And so I think that we gotta think about them, and again, we gotta figure out ways that we can go in and make ourselves be consistent, because kids want consistency, children want consistency, teenagers want consistency. So that's very much needed.
And I think
Thank
one of
you.
the things that you touched on is how depression shows up in children, which is anger, irritability, frustration, right? We associate those with behavioral issues, but if we dig a little bit deeper and get to the surface, those are really the child's way of showing that they're depressed. They need,
That-
I need to reach out, right? So
Absolutely.
it's not a bad kid. It's not an angry kid. It's a depressed kid who's frustrated and doesn't have the vocabulary to be able to communicate that effectively to an adult. So those
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
May I say one thing to that? One thing that I have noticed with, I've seen some children that are going through depression and what have you, but what I hear a lot, not just from parents, but say other people, is that, oh, well, they're in their teenage years, so that's just what they do. We have to get out of that stigma of they're in puberty stage, they're in this stage. No, it's just like us. We need to get them some help, because when you see them acting out, because I've seen some acting out, and we're talking straight A students, good students that's never been in trouble, and I see a whole different attitude from them, that means something is going on, and that's when you have to put your alert system on and say, hey, I need to get my child or this, get them someone to talk with, because if you don't, that's going to just embed deep within them, and they're never going to overcome that and get back to where they originally were if you don't get them help. And like you said, Lachey, that they don't know what to cry out for. They don't know how to ask for help, or they're ashamed to ask for help, or, well, I'm going to ask, but they're not going to do anything anyway, So I've been in situations where I've seen it and heard it with my own ears and eyes. And it's sad that we as parents, and I'll just put myself in that, it's not me, but we as parents need to really pay attention to our kids, because we're not really paying attention to our kids. And that's a big problem, I believe, as well.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much. I think we're running. It's getting time now for us to entertain do we have any questions in the chat at all, Jen?
We do have 2 comments from some of the conversation we had, both from Miss Emily. Now, I hope I say your last name right. Scheinfeld, I hope. PhD, pronouns she, her. She said, I think it is important to note that in traditional grief, especially surrounding death and dying, people's relationship with faith and God is a tricky one. Why would he do this? Why is this part of the grand plan? Am I not enough? Did I not pray hard enough? I think it's really important to allow people to explore that, talk about that, etc., because it can really cause difficulties with coping with their grief as they rationalize and work through their grief. Absolutely. And an additional comment that she contributed was, let's see. I think it's when Ms. Mildred was talking about the different resources. She said, Ms. Scheinfeld said, there's a wonderful doc on Instagram who discusses all of this and more if you're interested, at Teen Health Doc. So I'm assuming it's short for doctor.
Well, we'll look
Okay.
that up. We'll look
Okay.
we'll look
Okay.
that up.
All
That's
right.
great.
It looks like
Yeah.
I nailed the last name. So yeah.
Okay, good. So just in summary, when I think about our objectives for the evening related to, again, increasing awareness, providing some educational information regarding the phases of grief and depression, both with adults and children. I think our conversation, we did direct that conversation and provide some information. Certainly we could still be having that conversation for another hour, but that's not what we're planning to do. The second objective was to discuss management strategies and indicators for professional help. We did provide some information related to those things. Connect mental health to current community and individual experiences. We've had some individual experiences shared. We've made some connections related to what's available in the community and provided some numbers for resources in the chat. We will actually still, Jasmine, we will put some things on our webpage, our website, and our Facebook. We'll continue a little conversation because actually next month is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we wanted to get ahead of the game a little bit and start this conversation this month. And the fourth thing, identify resources available, which we've done, cost and procedures for access and services. So basically for the Andrews Center, Laura, it's basically there's numbers to call and to request assistance, or there's some triage that goes on when people call directly. Is that the process?
Correct. So
Okay.
in the chat, I included the emotional support line where they just sent that out today saying, you know, some people are calling, needing assistance with this, that, and the other, and they
Okay.
have some information for that, as well as I included the screening number. Anybody needing mental health services or wanting to be screened, I also included that.
Thank you. And the last one was to identify gaps in services and possible solutions. And that's been our last conversation related to the group that has formed and looking at solutions. Certainly appreciate you, Pastor McGrew, for sharing your experiences and your plan of action to help to direct some services outside the walls of the building and going out into the community. And I think, again, it really just validates the importance of us just being in communication with people, paying attention, being mindful, being just that encourager. You may be the first person that, you catch somebody right at the nick of time and have a conversation is important. But certainly us being armed with some information to provide numbers and provide some guidance as to where people can go, I think is very, very helpful. So I really, really appreciate all of you joining us this evening. And audience, I hope you've gained some, you've learned something here by listening to this group, and that we will continue to be helpful, be resources to each other. My personal story right now is I feel like I live at work. It's basically, so I'm glad to be in Oklahoma, actually. I feel like I have now been released from prison. And I'm, able to get out, and my staff, the therapist and everything, they're like, "You really are happy to be here today, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." But at any rate, it's done wonders for my mental health. So at any rate,
Miss
I'm
Ruby,
sorry.
one more thing.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned, oh, never mind. Looks like Miss Scheinfeld is on top of it. There was a question about services for teens in the LGBTQ family.
Okay.
Looks like she's provided some. Go
There-
ahead.
there-
I'm going to, I won't, we're going to end now, but I'm not going to close it out until we get that information from the chat. as far as the numbers and stuff. So that way we'll have access.
That is a really important question. That's the highest rate of depression and suicide in those statistics that we get from the Bureau of Statistics, from the government, from the NIMH, National Institute on Mental Health. That's
Okay.
there. It's and we're approaching that with some of the NAMI classes and Connection. It has people who suffer with various, symptoms or illnesses, and it's not just LBGQ, but LBGQ could certainly and should join that too, because some of the issues can be helped, and we'll see if we can it's finding the right enough people, but we will have online support groups with this type of thing as well, and also things in Spanish, and so other time I'll tell you all about that. Okay.
Actually, Pastor